Welcome to the Quick Talk Podcast with Joshua Latimer, where we discuss business, life, family, faith, struggle, fire, pain, and ultimately winning.
It's time to take massive action. Look, I can't work harder on your life or business than you do. It's ultimately all on you.
You know, God created all the food the birds would ever need, but he doesn't put it in their nest. You've got to go get it.
10 out of 10 people die. So how about doing something today that actually matters while you still can? Hey everybody, Josh here. Welcome to the Quick Talk Podcast. I am so excited that you get to learn amazing stuff from my guest today. I'm joined by Mike Callahan. Now, he runs a lawn care and snow removal company in upstate New York. Been doing it over 2 decades. Does over $1 million in revenue, 25 plus employees, lots of momentum and success, but a massive story full of ups and downs along the way. And I've been meaning to have Mike on for a long time. I finally twisted his arm enough and we made time. So Mike, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Josh, thanks for having me. Absolutely stoked. Just want to talk some business and kind of tell the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's really cool because we're at the end of 2017. And I don't know if this is true for you, but for me and a lot of our listeners, it took like 2 seconds and now the whole year is over, right? It goes so fast. And this is a great time of year to kind of look back and reflect, whether it's good or bad or ugly, on what happened? How did we do? Am I a slave to my company? Did it grow? Did I make progress? Did I not? Am I more confused than ever? Am I happy? It's just an emotional time of year for me as we look back and we also look to the next year. But if there's one thing we all know, it's that business isn't easy. Can you tell us a little bit about your backstory?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. Basically started out probably like a lot of people listening to the podcast here, started out in freshman year in high school, trying to pay earn some money from my car insurance for the vehicle I eventually would be buying. So started pushing a lawnmower around the neighborhood, knocking on doors. No real intent of getting into a real business, but needed to get some money because mom and dad wanted to teach me some work ethic and responsibility. So worked that business all the way through high school, incorporated before we got into college, 5 years of school under my belt college-wise. And during college, we were running probably 2 to 3 crews full-time. Running a pretty successful business, and then it became a determination after 5 years of college whether I took the traditional corporate route or went on to this entrepreneur journey that we ended up going. So obviously, I took the second road, went down the entrepreneurship road, and started a legitimate business. Obviously, I was trying to grow and scale at that point. In upstate New York, we do lawn care and snow removal. And that's pretty the quick background on it. And then obviously we had some ups and downs. And from those learnings, we ended up starting a secondary company for business consulting, mainly around automations. And that's kind of the backstory that I think you and maybe the listeners wanted to hear about, Josh. Is that kind of where you're going?
Yeah. I mean, 20 years is a long time, right? And when we were talking before, you had mentioned how, you had been doing it for, 15, 16, 17 years, and you had an event happened in your life that kind of led you towards what you do now with the automations and all these systems, which we'll definitely dig into so you can explain it. But it sounded to me like a crisis happened in your life and you had an epiphany about the power of systems. I'd love for you to just go there and tell that story.
Yeah. So the short version of the story was married to my high school sweetheart, and she basically, had been through the ups and downs of the business up to this point, but not to get into the total details of it, I was working 100 plus hours a week, and I had built a business that literally revolved around me. If I had left for a day or a few hours, this business would basically cease to exist. So after the divorce, it was kind of gut check time, and I went to find a solution or a way to run a business that didn't involve me on such a intimate level. So one late night, I was searching Google, and I came across the idea of automations. And it was pretty intriguing. I found a group of people called lifestyle entrepreneurs. For anybody who's not familiar with lifestyle entrepreneurs, it's a group of individuals that are, I guess, if you frame it up, is kind of living on the beach in Thailand or Bali, and maybe in your case, Costa Rica, but working maybe 4 to 5 hours a week with a laptop and a Wi-Fi connection, and they've automated their entire business. So once the systems and processes were documented, automated, the business kind of ran for itself. So originally we went out on a product called Infusionsoft, which is an automated CRM. And probably for 5, maybe 6 years, we went through from front to back and automated the entire business. So the first thing that we did was sales and marketing. We looked at the whole life cycle marketing, literally from lead acquisition through client acquisition to follow up, upselling, and then eventually, no matter how good your service is, somebody's going to cancel the service. So we actually went in and through long-term nurture reactivated a lot of our canceled customers or loss estimates. And there was some big learning curves there. But I think as we went through from lead acquisition, we decided and discovered that educating in a short-term nurture was really powerful because we could frame ourselves as a topic expert. And by doing this through an automation, we were able to overcome a lot of sales and price objections before they got there. So like in a home cleaning industry, it may be, hey, do you need to be home when we come clean your house? Or in the lawn care industry, a big concern is if we're mowing their lawn on a regular basis, are you going to close the gate behind you if there's a fence? And you may proactively say, we always close the gate behind us to protect you and your family. So by being able to do that proactively in an educational way, it drove the perceived value of our service up that allowed us to sell at higher prices and basically overcome any of the sales or price objections before the estimate or bid ever got to the client. So the first year and a half we used the automated system after we built it, we scaled by about 45 to 50%, which was really amazing to us. So we dove in even deeper and looked at the next step of the way. We were pumping out anywhere from probably 1,000 to 1,100 estimates a month. So at that point, we were having some major difficulties just getting that amount of volume of estimates out the door, let alone following up on them. So we created a system around that that we candidly call now the 20 days to close. And basically what that is we go in through a series of emails, two-way texts, and phone calls, the call script. And these call scripts are set up so the admins in our office now, and originally it was for myself to hold accountability before I started delegating this stuff. But basically it would tell you what to say, and we standardize our call script, how to overcome any of these objections and qualify the customer. Once we would follow up basically for 20 days and we got a yes or no answer. And it was a couple of big aha moments. Most of the sales closed obviously within 24 to 48 hours of the estimate, but there was another big chunk between 7 and 10 days and 18 and 20 days that we found, at least myself, I found really surprising. So we realized we were leaving a lot of money on the table at that point. And the next step along the journey that we ended up automating was our welcome and wow sequence. And basically that would welcome, indoctrinate them into what we were doing, to what to expect, merged in a temporary username and password for our online payment portal. And one thing that was really big that we learned along the way was trying to get most of our customers on credit cards. So this helped with our receivables and cash flow as well. And now moving forward after the last few years, we only deal with credit cards only if you're a new customer. And that's basically how we do business now. And these automations allow us to talk to the customer and let them know why we do this and how we do this.
Oh my gosh, there's so much. Let me hop in there. You're just dropping like value like crazy right now. And the big theme that I'm picking up as you talk through what you did, and like, thank you for sharing it in such detail. It's so powerful. People are going to freak out. Is it sounds like you're pretty interested in perceived value. Like I talk about that a lot on my podcast. That's something kind of near and dear to my heart, and how doing these little details, like the devil is in the details type stuff. Like you have a wow package and the way that you follow up for 20 days and you're building your authority and you're positioning your brand a certain way. Talk about how important that is. And, you know, to me, my opinion is it makes your company a nightmare to compete with, because when you have all this stuff built, which is a tremendous amount of work to do it from scratch, the little guy that's trying to compete with you almost has no chance at all. And they're going to be less expensive and still lose the bid every time, which drives them crazy and causes them to lower their price even more because, in my opinion, they don't understand perceived value, right? I mean, can you speak to that point a little bit?
Yeah, and I think, and I guess let me just preface it that I'm not really on a pedestal talking down, because these are all lessons that we've learned along the way. Some we got lucky enough to win, and then some, obviously we didn't do that well. We figured out, going back to the drawing board and tracking these things, we figured out how they won. But perceived value was one of the biggest takeaways that we had, and basically the perceived value was through an educational content. When we first got out of the gate, I don't want to say we were sleazy salesmen, but we were really pushing hard for the sale. But the biggest return on perceived value was providing valuable upfront content and teaching the consumers how to do it themselves. So if they weren't ready to buy immediately, hopefully with some reciprocity, they'd come back to you because you provided such a value and you framed yourself as the expert. So I think that seems to be the biggest mistake that we made, and we find other companies doing now as well, that kind of gives us that unfair advantage. They don't understand, why would you educate your potential consumer how to do the service they're requesting an estimate for? But when you frame it that way, it's so much more powerful. And they almost feel obligated to pay the higher price because there's such a perceived value of you being the expert in that field.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And the other benefit that I've seen in my companies is it takes the focus off of the price completely. It almost puts them at ease when you give first before you ask, because consumers are kind of like, they have their arms up like ready to fight when they get a quote. You know, getting a quote isn't a pleasant experience for a lot of people because people don't like to be sold. But everybody likes to purchase, everybody likes to buy, but we don't like to be sold, right? So when you're like coming in soft and just loving on them, and you're teaching and educating them, you're setting yourself up as the authority and the expert, taking the focus off of price and putting it on just the relationship and the value of the relationship. It's huge. It's absolutely huge. I mean, what did that do for your profitability? I know you grew sales in that. Did the business get, more profitable as you put these systems in place? And what happened to your margins?
Yeah, our margins definitely skyrocketed. At first, I'll be candid, they did not, because we weren't paying attention to fixing our labor costs. So what we did is we implemented a piece rate pay system. If you're not familiar with that, that basically pays on the budgeted man hours. And the whole goal was to align our team members or employees with the company. Usually it's an antagonistic relationship where the management's just pounding down on the employees saying, you got to work faster, you got to work faster. So when you do a piece rate pay system, let's use the example, if the person on the crew is getting paid for 10 hours, so they're budgeted for 10 hours. If they do it in 8 hours, we still pay them for 10 hours. So most of our employees now with this piece rate pay system, we implemented it just about the same time when we really got into this automation and content marketing. They kind of went hand in hand. But as the sales grew exponentially, we needed a way to align the employees to work smarter, not harder, but have quality control tied to it as well. So they kind of went hand in hand. But by aligning our goals with our employees' goals, we were able to improve their lifestyle and bring a better end goal for them as well. So I think it was the combination of all the marketing, the content, providing that value, but getting our employees to buy into something greater than a paycheck at the end of the week. Yeah.
No, that is so good, Mike. This is better than I would have ever hoped for. Like, I know you have so much knowledge in your brain, but this is great stuff, man. And it also has a filtering effect when you have like a performance-based pay structure, because it has a natural weeding out of low-level players, but it also highly rewards rock stars, which is amazing, right? Because over time, your team is just going to be full of rock stars who are going to crush it, right? They're always going to come in ahead. Plus, what are some other benefits of having the piece rate? Like, is there a benefit with your sales team and the way that they price, and then the crews, like kind of giving feedback on things that are maybe underpriced, or did it just bring consistency to everything?
Yeah, so I guess before you ever, if somebody out there is listening, is thinking about implementing a piece rate pay system, one thing that I'm going to strongly caution you before you jump in is we really need to have a strong understanding of our financials. A production rate-based estimating system. We use a MORE system. It's a multiple overhead recovery system where we recover our labor, equipment, and G&A, which is general administrative costs in the office, separately. And the reason why I bring that up is if you don't have a strong handle on how much work you can produce per man hour, the cost of it, and the break-even cost, that's a scary situation, because when you put a budgeted time to that, you're holding your employees' financial livelihood to that number, and if you're botching estimates, they're going to call you out on it. So we've got to have some understanding that we have a strong historical database for job costing to make sure it's a sound estimating system. But once you have those numbers in place, business becomes fun. Now it's a math game, very similar to marketing. So if we know we put out 1,000 marketing pieces, on average, we're going to get so many leads, and out of that, we're going to close so many sales. Same thing with the production rate-based estimating and the piece rate. We know per 1,000 square foot for mowing or maybe if you're in the home cleaning industry, per 1,200 square foot home or small, medium, and large master bedrooms, we know on that scale on a predictable rate that we can put that on it with quality work. So we really need that financial base to make sure we've recovered our overhead and we know how much we can produce per hour with a quality standard tied to it. So if the guys or girls in the field don't finish the job appropriately, we're going to send them back to take care of that job before they get paid for that budgeted time. Very
good. Very good. And, that's some very powerful stuff, especially for companies that are in maybe stage 4, stage 5. I teach this concept called the 5 stages of service business growth. And, once you have a team and you have the ability to sit down and dive deep on financials and you have enough historical data to do that, like, honestly, running a larger company with a team, it's a lot easier than when you're hustling and you have the little company. So let's go back in time a little bit and speak to the little guy, because they listened to what you just said and they said, holy crap, like, I don't know if I'm going to buy groceries next week. Like, I can't build this model with all this odd, like, I have one employee and like, he doesn't show up half the time. What advice do you have for someone in the lawn care business or any service business in those early grinding stages? Like, what mistakes should they avoid? What should they be focusing on if they're maybe not ready to go this deep on the corporate CEO stuff yet?
I think from day number one, if I was to redo it all and learn from my mistakes, and which would have let me scale the business a lot quicker, would be tracking the financials and tracking how long I was at each and every job. And if you're not using anything, even on a computer or a smartphone, I mean, I don't care if it's a pad and paper, write down the start and stop times, write down some stats of how big the property is or how many rooms you're taking care of, maybe the home cleaning industry. You really just need to have a sound understanding of what you're doing and tracking it. Because what we find is, if anybody is a big fan of Michael Gerber, but a lot of people are on an entrepreneurial seizure, is basically he calls it. And they're basically glorified technicians that have started a business to basically, quote unquote, stop working for the man. But if you're not running a business and just aware of what the implications of what you're doing are, you're running blind. And a good example of this I'll share right actually after that divorce is I've been really, as you can tell, I'm very analytical. But for the first time ever, and this will be the only time, and I hope people can learn from this, is we ran the business, or I did, I ran the business by my bank account balance. But our receivables and everything like that had been so strong that we had more money in the bank early enough before our bills got in. So long as there was $100,000 in the bank or so, that was our benchmark at that point of the business, that we were probably doing okay. And we had been running job costing reports every week to make sure we were making money and running the financials. But that year, obviously, was a low point. I did not. But by running the business off the bank account balance, which we see a lot of businesses do, especially in the early years, you can get yourself in trouble. Long story short, by December, I was upside down $75,000 and didn't know it till it was too late. So my suggestion would be, from day one, take a look at the financials, have an understanding, go take an online course. There's some good resources for books. Profit First by Mike Michalowicz kind of gives you a real high-level overview of the systems financially, and it gives you some framework at least.
Yeah, Mike's awesome. He was actually on my podcast a while back, I think about a year ago. I've been thinking about reaching back out to him because people really liked his episode. But you're right. It's funny because I think, like you referenced, that someone starts a business just so they can stop working for the man. That is so common. And to me, the problem with that is you're not starting a business towards something. You're starting your business to avoid something. It's almost like, I remember when I was younger, I asked my sister, well, what kind of man do you want to marry, right? Because she said she was having some frustrations with the relationship. And she said, well, I don't want someone that is lazy. I don't want someone that's this. I don't want someone that's that. But she couldn't articulate what she did want. And so I think when you're clear on what is the outcome or the mountaintop, like what are you trying to do with your business? In your case, you wanted to be that laptop entrepreneur. And I know that your service company now, you only work an hour or two a week on it, right? Like you're there, that must have been your outcome. How important is it for someone to be clear on what they want? I call it your why or your mountaintop. Is that something that you spend time thinking about?
Yeah, all the time. Very similar to your why. We use the terminology of your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal. This is a 3 to 5 year plan of where you want to go. Tough to reach. So we label that out of where we're going, and we back that into a yearly, a quarterly, and then right down to a daily goal. So we're really clear where we want to go. My goal was to strictly get out of the day-to-day operations of the business and build a system and a team that could do it for me. And then spend some time with the family and things I wanted to do. And then obviously the entrepreneurial sickness, I started a secondary company that we're scaling out now called Simple Growth. But I think having that BHAG or that goal, whatever you want to call it, and being able to dial that right down into a daily accountability where you're tracking it on pen and paper or Google Doc. And if you have a team, I really suggest the Monday Huddle. And I wouldn't suggest more than 3 things going into that goal, because any more than 3 is going to be hard to obtain. And we track them on a non-emotional point system out of 5 points. And it's completely transparent. So everybody in the organization, including myself, has these big 3, and we report on them. And it helps everybody hold accountable. And we know where we're going and where the ship's going before it's too late. We're not going to just have a yearly goal and 12 months from now see if we hit it.
It's funny because all of my friends like you, I have so many, large part because of this podcast, I've just met all these amazing people. All of them that are doing, multiple millions in revenue, they do some basic, simple, fundamental things. They all do it. Like, they pay attention to certain KPIs, metrics, and financial stuff. They have written goals that they reverse engineer back down to the daily level. This stuff isn't rocket science, but when I work with small companies that are struggling, it's almost like they're grasping at straws, reaching for this, reaching for that. They read a lot of books, but they're not implementing the basic stuff. For example, if you're listening to Mike talk to you right now, this is for all the listeners who I love. Like, I totally want to hug you right now. If you're listening to this, and you haven't done these baseline things, like what's your average ticket? What's your average crew hour? What daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly revenue goals you need to hit next year to be on pace to get your BHAG? You don't have to be a genius to do this. If you don't have those things in place, nothing else matters except getting those things in place. Like, everything else is like a detail, like a tactic of what kind of copy should I have in my direct mail piece? Well, okay, cool. But that's kind of being over in the weeds if you don't have this foundation laid to begin with. Would you agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to putting the work in. At the end of the day, entrepreneurship's not easy. Owning a business isn't easy. There's a lot of people out there talking the game, but it's getting down, rolling your sleeves up, and getting it done. And like one of the examples that I just was talking to a gentleman this week on a screen share is he was like, well, I don't know, should I invest all this money in marketing, or should I get the employees to do the work first? Well, obviously, we don't want to waste the time getting employees if we don't have the work, because obviously you're going to incur some overhead that you don't have the work for. And his big hang up was being able to put a marketing piece out. Well, we don't know what works or doesn't work till we actually put the first draft out. So the first draft is better than no draft. You just really need to pull back and just get it and jump. I guess maybe not pull back, but just put the work in, get it done, throw it out there, take some risks, because you don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work until you try it, and then we can refine it. But that seems to be the biggest issue. And once you figure out your marketing and get a system that's working, business is fun. It's almost easy. Like you said, these numbers, it's repeatable. And then once you figure out your marketing systems, the next biggest hurdle that we find is going out and creating almost a marketing system or a funnel for finding qualified employees and systematizing that. Because once we hit that 500,000,
yes,
that 750 mark, now your problem as a CEO, or I guess your main goal and function in that corporation or whatever it is going out and building a team that can scale and finding the right people and putting them on the right seats in the bus. That seems to be the next big hurdle.
Yeah, and it's so true. I was talking this morning, I had a few coaching calls, and I was explaining to someone that the only 2 real functions that they have until they get up to over 500,000 at least is sales and marketing, and then employee stuff. Like, that's it. It's like a teeter-totter. And you start on the sales side. And I don't care if you have no money or not. You can go out and put your boots on and do boots on the ground. I call it bog marketing. You spin up momentum, and you're living in this world of sales like a maniac, putting in massive effort and action, testing and trying things fearlessly as much as you can, even though it's imperfect. in the process of doing that, you get momentum, which is going to put a lot of pressure on you. Well, then you're going to pivot over to the employee side. And if you're really small, like you're not going to have super complex employee systems, but this is where you begin. Like you're going to find out how to recruit, interview, hire, train, and develop someone. Okay, awesome. And then as they start to do their thing, then you pivot back over into the sales side. It's like this teeter-totter, back and forth, it's oscillating between creating massive momentum and pressure, building the team around you, and then going back over here. And then when you get up to maybe 5, 6, 700, 800,000, you can really get strategic. And I agree, that is when it gets fun, because then you can like crack your knuckles and sit at your desk and like build an org chart and like figure out where the butts go on the bus and all that stuff. And is that how you see it too?
Yeah, exactly. You nailed it with the org chart too. So what we do is we project out what that looks like for like the next 3 years. We don't put names on it, but we put positions. And as you can imagine, as we are right now to where we may be in 3 years, I may be wearing multiple hats in the business, but we're going to dial out each specific position or in the business and what they're responsible for. And now we know, okay, well, if I'm having a hard time because I'm wearing 6 different hats as we put this on the wall, we use a big Post-it note, like a sticky note with small sticky notes underneath that actually go on the sheet so we can actually move them around and manipulate it. We do this with the team, but we project out the 3 years and we put all the positions. And then when we're naming out all the positions, where we're at and where we're going to be in 3 years, we might put some names on it at the current state and say, wow, well, Joe is having a hard time getting anything done. Well, now it's obvious when we got on the wall why he's having a hard time. He's doing the job of 6 people. And if we're looking to, maybe break Joe's position up now and hire one person to split the workload, it's, in my opinion, it's too late when you actually need the person. So we need to go out and be constantly interviewing and looking for individuals. So in our business, we actually go out and interview every Monday, Wednesday, and sometimes Friday. For the office and the field. So I use the analogy of a sports team. We're building the bench. So if the players on the field aren't producing, we've got people on the bench to replace them. And then when we hit the major spikes of sales, we can go out and actually work a qualified labor pool that we actually rank in an A, B, and C fashion with or without a driver's license, obviously for reasons if they're going to be a crew leader or not need a license, so it's sortable. But we use our CRM, which is Service Autopilot. Now we have a searchable database that we can continually update. So we're not hiring the first person that walks into the door with a pulse, but we're hiring from our database that we're qualifying and ranking. And kind of where I'm going for this is the gentleman that runs my whole entire lawn care company. He came in probably 2 years before we really needed him. But sometimes you need to figure it out in budget to make it work, because if I'm looking for that gentleman the day I need him, that's way too late. So you need to be constantly interviewing and recruiting for those future positions. You don't know what those future positions look like unless you put them up on the wall and put some skill sets and some things underneath them. Does that kind of make sense? Oh my God. Like it's exactly in alignment with my total belief system. And honestly, it's not even opinion. Like this is how you do it. I just want the listeners to understand. This is a huge blind spot. People do hiring in like a chaotic fire environment where it's complete freak out mode. And when you have a small company and someone leaves, your crew leader quits. That's a horrific, sucky experience that I've went through, and a lot of listeners have went through. I know you've went through, and it's like falling off a cliff. But when you put the systems in place that you're talking about, I encourage people to continuously recruit and interview year round, regardless if they're hiring at all. Exactly like what you just said, because when you have a waiting list of competent, qualified, vetted people, it's not a cliff anymore. It becomes a speed bump, right? No, and you nailed it. And like just coming back to the thing I said before, I'm not sitting on a pedestal here preaching. The whole reason we got into that system is literally half of my company, probably 15 or 16 years ago, literally left. I showed up to the shop one morning and they were gone. We had a couple hundred lawns that need to be mowed, and I literally had half my staff. What a nightmare. That was another dark area, but I said, never again will I ever be stuck in that position. So they went out, long story short, and started their own little company and tried to take our accounts. And it didn't last more than a few weeks. They were under, but that was a major ripple. We lost some customers over it because we couldn't fulfill. But at that point, I knew I would never be held victim to the people that we employ if they were going to be vindictive towards us. Obviously, we got a good culture now, and we've invested some major time into that now, but never again would I ever have that feeling of walking in and be missing half of my staff. So we are constantly recruiting, and everybody knows it in the organization, and nobody's job's at risk. But there is an accountability factor that we are still looking for future growth, or if there's an issue, typical situation, you got a 2-person crew and one person doesn't show up, that's the day you're going to get blackmailed for that raise. That never happens again in our business. We may get them to Friday, but you better believe we're going into that CRM and finding that database and working to hire a new person. So
you got it, man. And little companies, like when you have an employee that has too much on their shoulders, like you're in a position of extreme risk, that employee knows it. And they know it. And over time, like they might have been thankful for the job to begin with, but their level of like expectation and their swag is going to grow. Like you don't want that. You want them to have a defined position with a great opportunity, with a good culture, but they should never have that kind of power over your company because you're totally caught, with your hands tied. And then they can demand to either get paid too much or they can leave and cripple your company. It's a horrible thing, man. That's good. And this is a good transition point because I wanted to ask you about Simple Growth Systems. And I also wanted to talk about your employee systems as far as the way that you do training and leadership development and how you've kind of automated that piece of it. And I know that ties into Simple Growth Systems, which is an additional company that Mike runs. It's an amazing thing. Explain what that is. And then if you could, talk about how you've automated that training process.
Yes, I guess basically everything we're kind of talking about from the last 23 years in business, we were doing all these processes manually, and obviously some were great and some obviously needed some refinement, but we no intentions of ever selling the thing or sharing it. It was our local competitive advantage that helped us dominate our market locally, but it was my buddy from Phoenix who's pretty heavy in tech came into one of our mastermind groups. We hold a masterminds group for 3 or 4 of us, go to each guy's territory basically, and we had it up on the TV in my office, and I started showing him what we had built, and I guess he put it in perspective how powerful it really was. At that point, I'd kind of taken it for granted and assumed everybody was doing the same thing because I was living in my own little world. So as a side note, if you can get around like-minded people in your industry, highly suggested it. I'd like to say get naked in front of them, be honest, be vulnerable, let them tear your business apart and help you when you're struggling, and when you're winning, keep pushing you to keep driving forward. But to get back to Simple Growth, we basically created a done-for-you solution. Comes full packed with marketing content built, 80 to 90 documents, and literally the same exact life cycle marketing from lead acquisition through estimate follow-up to pre-estimate nurture, welcome and wow. We also go in and reactivate. If you imagine each one of your services an imaginary bucket. So every estimate that you lose per service, the system automatically goes out and reactivates that every 12 months. Hey, for whatever reason, we lost your lawn mowing estimate. We'd love the opportunity to get you a new quote. So big takeaway for the listeners here is last year, a perfect example was we generated 176 new estimates in our company off estimates we had lost previously. So our client acquisition cost, what it cost in marketing costs, maybe your Facebook ads, your radius bomb or whatever else you're doing there, whatever you're doing to drive new clients was costing us about $70 per new customer. But once we started segmenting and reactivating the lost estimates, we drove that down to $58 per client. So those 176 estimates, we actually closed those at about 64 to 65%. So if you're not bucketing those estimates and reactivating them, in my opinion, you're really throwing money out the door because we're paying good money to drive them to our website or call the office, but a lot of companies are forgetting about them as soon as we lose that estimate. You paid for that lead. Why not continue to work that lead and nurture it until you can turn it into a customer? Yeah.
Well, people are just overwhelmed, Mike. I mean, they feel like it's another thing. Because there is a process to this, like if you have no customers, well, maybe you don't start there. You got to get some momentum, there's a process. I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes from is when do they do this? How big should they be? Like when's too late? When's too early? And that's like a 7-hour conversation. It's very difficult to quantify. The thing that I think is really cool is that you market for employees. Like you have a funnel for employees. And my buddy Mike Kaplan, he has a $20+ million carpet cleaning business in Minnesota. It's just gigantic. And he calls his employees internal customers. I thought that was so cool. Isn't that cool? He said he has his external customers, and he has a machine to market, harvest leads, convert the leads, nurture, just like what you talked about. But he also has a system to take care of and nurture his, what he calls internal customers, or his employees. And I just think, I don't know, it's kind of a cool way to look at it, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's awesome. So as you come full circle in our story is we grew that sales machine. We grew so fast, we literally almost went out of business because we couldn't find the staff to support that growth. So just like you said, we took the marketing that we had dialed in for our external customers, as you frame it, but our internal customers were our employees, our team members. So we took the marketing lessons and the skill set that we learned to go out and acquire customers to actually go out and acquire these rock star employees. In my opinion, especially with your millennials in the workforce now, we're selling our business as a place to work just as much as they're selling themselves as a future staff member. So we need to take that skill set of marketing and highlight our culture and our core values and what we're all about, and really sell our place as a place they want to work. No longer does just the static, now hiring $12 an hour or whatever it is, ad work anymore. We've got to get them for something to buy into, a culture, because that's not what this next generation is looking for. It's no longer do you go to Kodak or Xerox or wherever other IBM and spend your 30 to 40 years there and basically retire and die in that company. Things are different now. So we've got to be hip to what's going on in the market and the demographic and psychology of the new people coming in that we're hiring.
That's right, man. If people don't wake up and get this stuff, what Mike's talking about, listen, if you're not understanding that you have no choice if you want to have a successful business, but to become a marketer. You are a marketer. In fact, right now, whether you realize it or not, you already are a marketer. The question is, are you a good marketer? And you're marketing internally, driving culture and setting vision and working with people and developing people, and externally to let the world know that you exist and get them to engage with your brand. You're a marketer. Like, we're marketers. It really is all about marketing. That's a foundational cornerstone of every single business. But people don't look at their employees in that way. And like you said, like in the Industrial Revolution, it was like a privilege for someone to go get an hourly rate job in a factory, right? So these companies, they didn't have a lot of like compassion or love for their people. That doesn't work anymore. People want to be part of something, and you have to be able to articulate that and communicate it and invest in their life. Especially, like, I love that you brought up millennials, because they get a bad rap, and there are tons of amazing, talented young people. It's just they're just motivated differently, right? Do you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, and I don't know if you touched on it or not, but I think that we need to be cognizant of too, especially with the millennials and the generation maybe right before them, is as people's experience with your business working for you or interviewing for you, that's no longer behind closed doors. Social media, different things like Glassdoor, all these different social outlets. You need to make sure you're doing your things on your company, not only with your consumers, but your employees as well. Make sure we're doing things by the book and creating this culture that people like, because originally we were just worried about our consumers, only telling 5 or 6 of their friends, bad-mouthing us vocally. But when we screw up, now we're on Facebook, we're on Google reviews, we're on Yelp, we're on Home Advisor. Well, the same rings true now with this new millennial group. People are posting their experiences and what they feel about working for your company. So if we're not addressing this proactively sooner than later, this can not only affect how your ability is to go out and basically get new clients, but the ability to actually go out and find those rockstar employees. Because what used to be hidden in a niche of people just talking to their friends and family, now it's worldwide. So you're going to be exposed for your strengths and your weaknesses. So I think it's time that we proactively, as employers, address these things up front so it doesn't get us later. Amen
to that, man. The only constant in our world right now is change. Like, things are changing so fast. I'm concerned for so many small businesses. They're just completely asleep at the wheel, man. They're not understanding the way technology is going, the way that Facebook and Google and Amazon are creating marketplaces to get in between us and our customer. And if you're not prepared and you don't know your numbers and you're not interesting, you're just going to get crushed by people that do understand these things. You're going to get killed out there. I'm telling you, we got quantum computers and artificial intelligence and all this automation, all this like things are crazy, and there's so much opportunity in it, like massive opportunity, because most people are asleep at the wheel. But if you're listening to this and you're like feeling a little asleep at the wheel, like wake up, listen to Mike.
And if you think it's just because you're in the service industry and you're not vulnerable to these technology shifts and disruptions, you are. And I, for one, and I'm sure, Josh, you feel the same way, I don't want to be the taxi driver that got crushed by Uber. No one in the taxi industry thought they could ever be touched by a phone and how that could dominate and just shake their whole world up. Well, I was talking to another person in the industry last week down in the Virginia, D.C. area. And you'll never guess who called him and wanted to know if he wanted to use his snowplows for their service. Uber.
No way.
So we just heard about it last week. I haven't got the final details on it, but there's things that we need to proactively be doing in our service industry, because you know that Amazon has got home services. If this plans out to be true, from what I understand, I respect the gentleman and I believe what he's saying. If Uber's trying to potentially get into the service industry already, and we've got other national companies like Canopy that are out of the South Carolina or North Carolina area that have committed to basically dominate the residential only lawn care and snow removal, and they've gotten several million dollars in different rounds of VC money. It's not when or if, it's happening.
Well, are you familiar with the app Lawn Guru?
Not real familiar. I've heard of it, but it's the same kind of concept.
It's the same kind of thing. They're growing like wildfire. It's a really interesting concept. The small businesses aren't going to like part of how it works, a lot of them, but homeowners love it, man. You can like download an app, like you can draw a line around your lawn and instantly get a quote in real time and book it, and it's done, and it pays through the app. The people come mow your lawn and leave. I mean, there's so many things happening that it's mind-numbing. So not to overwhelm the audience, I guess my main point is go back to those fundamentals as a step one. Understand your numbers, your base KPIs and metrics, key performance indicators. Understand your finance, your margin, your payroll, all that stuff. Like, figure it out. Go on YouTube until you pass out and figure it the freak out. You got to get this done, and then make sure that you become a marketing ninja to both employees and to customers. Like, that's a good baseline that's going to help anybody just to start with, right? Do you have anything else to add?
No, I mean, you hit it perfectly. And once you have that baseline, figure out how you can make your communication and your marketing personal. Because at some point, the national brands, it's not going to be a personal communication. So if you're going to own your local market, you have a distinct advantage if you can adopt some of these technologies. Automations has been around for a long time, but in our industry, the service industry especially, it's not bleeding edge, but it's still cutting edge. Not many people are doing it. I think that's going to be a key, because people are going to want the speed and the convenience that you're talking about, Josh, being able to sign up online and pay with their credit card and just basically set it and forget it. But we can do that through some of the new technology and automation that's already existing, and have a foot up on the national level, because we could be a local competitor that basically is providing valuable content. We're trustworthy, and it's a local option, but we provide the convenience of the national brand. So I think, not to scare everybody, but I think at least at this point in the game, if we can adopt the technology and be the first to market in our local market, we'll be able to play with the big brands, because the technology let's talk about for what it is. It levels the playing field. There was no point in time where I can go out as a company, running $2 to $3 million a year in annual sales and be able to compete with a national company like Brickman or Valley Crest, or now it's Brightview, or even in the home cleaning industry like a Mary Maid or something like that. There was no point where a small brick and mortar business or service business could compete with these monsters. Right down to Facebook. I mean, we haven't really talked about social media, but you touched on it, where you may not have a marketing budget. Well, you don't need a marketing budget if you're just providing free content that's valuable to your local service area. And then Facebook ads, when you start investing the money in your Facebook ads, you can be more relevant and have a lower cost per click or acquisition than these massive companies, because you can spend the time and dial it in just the geographic area and the demographics. So I think the small business, to an extent, doesn't have the bureaucratic red tape. We can be nimble. We can continue to grow and progress. So it's not a scary thing. The scary thing is if you just sit there and just have the assumption that it could never happen to your service industry, because it's going to. So my commitment to myself and my team is never to be that taxi driver at my lawn care, snow removal industry. And if that's true that Uber is looking at doing that, if it hasn't, it's coming down the pipeline, whether it's them or somebody else. But there's a mows and plows app that does the same exact thing as Uber right now. So they're there. But when you have a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar company like Uber that possibly could be doing it, that gets my attention. I want to get that ahead of that as quick as possible.
Yeah. And yeah, you're right. It's not scary. It's a massive opportunity. I mean, it should like shock your system if you weren't really thinking like this, but it should actually get you really excited, guys, because you can win. You can do this. And I love how you talked about personalization. At Radius Bomb, we have our app, and it sends direct mail and gifts and all kinds of really cool stuff. But one of the things that makes our product so effective is it's hyper targeted, but it's personalized. You could send a picture of someone's house on the front of a postcard, or you could target just one street, and then the postcard could talk about that street or that lake or those homes on that golf course or those homes in that gated community. Personalization is something that is a lot easier for us small guys to do locally, because we know our market. So that does give us an unfair advantage against the big guys. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, real quick, I think you're just being humble about it too. But Radius Bomb, just an amazing product. But when you have a product like that that's customizable, if you can speak to the specific neighborhood or homeowner association and there's a personal connection, well before that type of technology was around, we found that was even with our direct mailing, we had different batches that went out that spoke specifically to that neighborhood, the association, and mentioned it, and mentioning how we took care of the people in the Sheffield neighborhood, and we only serviced the Sheffield neighborhood. That's when that marketing became really meaningful and connected. But when you can automate it and run it through a product like that at scale is phenomenal.
Yep. It's just another secret weapon, man. And it's inexpensive. It's accessible to everybody. And there's tons of technology. In fact, talk a little bit about Simple Growth Systems. And I know people, if they want to reach out to you, they can go to simplegrowthsystems.com. That's correct, right?
Yeah, with an S. But yeah, check it out. We've got a lot of free content on how to do this stuff yourself if you want to do it. But basically, it's a done-for-you system. We have the sales automation system. We have the employee recruiting, training, and onboarding system. So literally, it's almost like a business in a box. And next quarter, we're releasing a third automation package that goes over your daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly repetitive tasks in the office. So it could be customer service, accounts receivable, marketing. Then we have our CEO strategic leadership function. So they hold for accountability and give you basically a roadmap right down to your quality control, and then asset and equipment management. So down to oil changes, blade changes, anything like that, inspections on vehicles and trailers. So once we have that third package out, we're continuing to develop more, but those three will be the core foundation, almost like a business in a box. We're going to almost give you a franchise with no franchise fees, just to give you a framework to take your particular process and systems, plug it into a proven system, and be able to step back and let this thing work better without you. Because let's be honest, as business owners, a lot of times we are the bottleneck to growth. We like to micromanage, but once you've set a system up and you step back and let it work and let your staff and team become owners of it and promote the thing, that's when the magic, at least in my business, happened.
Absolutely. And for all the listeners, I hope you're appreciative of Mike's time, and I know that you are. It's just that, 23 years of pain and suffering and trying things and spending hundreds of thousands on things that didn't work and figuring it out. And look, I've had all that in my life too. Like, look at the value that's produced by someone like Mike persevering through things. Like he said, he's not on a pedestal, but he's persevered. Like, he knows all this stuff. You can access his systems. Go to simplegrowthsystems.com. Mike, I appreciate your time so much. Hopefully we can talk again soon.
Yeah, looking forward to hanging out in San Diego at the end of January, beginning of February. A couple conferences there, and can't wait to hang out again. But if anybody has some questions, obviously feel free to drop them. It's simplegrowthsystems.com too. Happy to answer any questions that you may have, obviously free of charge, just to kind of help the ecosystem here and everybody listen to the podcast.
Awesome, brother. Thank you so much. God bless. Merry Christmas. And I'll see you in San Diego. Whoop, whoop.
All right, take care.
Hey, thanks for hanging out, friends. And from all of us here at the Quick Talk Podcast team, we hope you loved today's show. We hope that you were inspired to become a doer and not just a listener. Apply what you've heard today in your own business and watch things change for the better. Lastly, remember that all the money in the world can't save your soul. Seek first the kingdom of God, my friends. We'll see you next time.
For more information about the Quick Talk Podcast or Joshua's other businesses, visit our website, quicktalkpodcast.com. Have a blessed day.